Here at the museum, we've been updating some of our Second World War displays, including this one here, charting the changes in military communications through the Second World War. We've been trying to improve interpretation and bring out more different objects to display for visitors to the museum. In addition to the communications equipment, we've also been bringing out objects that relate to it. One object that we've now put on display is this Slidex wallet. Slidex was a method of communication developed by the British through the Second World War, and its key advantages and disadvantages were both in its relative simplicity. Encryption technologies and developing methods to keep information secret from enemies was a massive focus for all sides during the Second World War. In encryption technologies, greater complexity brings with it the necessity for more complex equipment, such as Enigma. Slidex was complex to the extent that it was relatively difficult to break without the keys, but it was simple enough that it could be used easily by a man in the field with nothing more than the wallet, the phrase card, 6 sliding keys, and a pencil. Messages would be sent using Morse code and could be sent using an individual radio man pack, such as the wireless set number 18 here in the case, or also through wired, wireless, and other visual communication devices. Keys for the week were given out within the command structure and typically would be valid for about half a day. At first, the keys consisted of 16 letters for the top slider and 22 letters for the side slider. Later on in the war, this was changed to use pairs of letters to increase the complexity of the code. The card in the centre contained words or phrases that would be used in certain contexts. As such, there were a wide variety of cards available, and also blank cards to be used within units for their own designations. This card, for example, contains a lot of keywords and phrases that would be useful for planning and carrying out tactical manoeuvres. For example, it contains location phrases such as depot, as well as other useful tactical phrases referring to groups such as artillery and infantry, as well as commands forward, stop and halt. The best way to describe the way that the Slidex works is to encode a short message. First, the sender would pick the card that they need and put it in the center panel. Next, they would need to put the keys from the day or half day into the wallet. They would need to pick the color corresponding to the level in the military hierarchy that they were having the conversation. For example, red would be Army HQ and green, as in this instance, would be battalion or other units. Each of the first 5 pairs of letters would have a number randomly assigned to them as part of the key for the day. This meant that not only the key was random each day, but the alignment of the key could be random for each individual conversation. On starting the encoded part of the conversation, the sender would Morse code SLX to let the receiver know that they were encoding the next part of the message. Next, they would give the card number, and then they would give the number for the alignment of the top key and the number for the alignment of the side key. The receiver could then set up their own Slidex to match. Now the sender can begin their message. Locating the word or phrase that they need on the card in the center, they would then use the first letter from the top key and typically the second letter from the side key in order to provide a grid reference for any of the words or phrases that they wanted to send. The 2-letter combination would then be transmitted to the receiver, providing them with that grid reference to the word or phrase being sent. For example, if we wanted to send a really simple message like move left, this would be the process. In the first instance, we would code for I and Q to give the location of the word move. It can also be moved or moving. And then I and S to give the location of the word left. If the sender needed to spell out any words or send numbers, for example for coordinates, a slightly different system would need to be used. This would involve coding for one of the switch on grids located across the card. This would in effect activate the red numbers and letters seen in the corners of the grids, and they would then transmit the coordinates for the letters and numbers that they need as for the words and phrases. Once finished, in a similar way to coding for switch on, they would code for one of the switch off cells, and that would indicate to the receiver that they were concluding that part of the message and returning to words and phrases. Although Slidex worked pretty well, It wasn't until after the war the British and the Allies realised that the Germans had been able to break the code within 3 hours if they had the keys, and within 6 without the keys. Nonetheless, Slidex was relatively successful and used throughout the Second World War and beyond, only becoming redundant in the 1970s when it was replaced by a similar system used across NATO countries.